Good evening, everyone. You are very welcome to the CPSMA Safe and Healthy Workplaces, the HSA Inspection Process in Schools event. The panel will be delighted to receive any questions you may have. Please use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your PC or laptop screen. If you're using an iPad, you will find this feature located at the top of your screen. Without further ado, I will now hand you over to your facilitators this evening, Mr. Rory Darcy and Mr. Donal O'Murcu, Education Advisor, CPSMA, and Shay Bannon Consultant. Thank you.
Follow year of Galer is fair fáilte road gudi on webinar gar show on ihe. Well, good evening everyone, and you're very welcome to tonight's webinar. As Helena has introduced us there, my name is Rory Darcy. I work as an education advisor with CPSMA, and I'm joined on screen this evening by my colleague, Donal O'Murcu. Donal also works as an education advisor here with CPSMA. Donal, tá fáilte road, how are you today, sir?
Great, Rory. Looking forward to the webinar.
Very good. And Donal and I are joined by, to keep an eye on us throughout the webinar today, by Shay Bannon. Shay, a former principal of a school for over 20 years. Shay, love your backdrop, and a health and safety consultant. Shay, you're very welcome, Shay.
Very good. Look forward to joining you all this evening. Thank you.
Very good. Look, it's been a tough day and a long day, I'm sure, for many people listening to the webinar. You've had a long day at school or as a chair. And we want to just thank you for taking the time to be with us here this evening. We're going to focus on the HSA inspection process in primary schools. And our aim today is to outline, or this evening is to outline the process, to go down through it, and really to look at what resources are available there to help schools prepare for the inspections, and really to focus on all the work that is done already. So kicking off this evening, Donal will look at the inspection process, and then we'll have a quick discussion around that. And then we will also then have a look at, as I said, resources available. Throughout this evening's webinar, in terms of housekeeping, all participants are asked to stay on mute. The Q&A section here of the screen is enabled. So if anybody has any questions that they would like us matters they'd like to be raised, or questions they'd like us to have a look at, please, type away there, and we'll try and have a look at them through the course of the webinar, which we hope will last somewhere between 40 to 45 minutes there or thereabouts. This is one of 3 webinars actually that we have available on cpsma.ie. If you go into www.cpsma.ie, into the member section, into webinars and podcasts, you will find the other webinars in this series, which are an introduction to health and safety for boards of management, and school health and safety risk assessments, and the additional resources. But we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about that as time goes on. So I think without further ado, we're going to kick off with a bit of a question, an introductory poll. And as you can see on your screen there, we just want you to have a look at this question. Are HSA inspections, are they new for primary schools? Is this a new thing? Is this another inspection for primary schools, and is it new? So simply vote yes or no, and we'll come back and we'll have a look at that, the results of those polls later on in our presentation. I'm going to hand you over to Donal now, my colleague. Donal, you're going to talk us down through the process there. Don't forget to vote in the introductory poll as Donal is doing the presentation, and we'll come back to those results. Are HSA inspections new for primary schools? So Donal, will you talk us through what exactly is a HSA inspection?
Thanks, Rory. So people can be putting in their answer to the poll there, but we're going to look now at the first couple of slides, and they might be a little bit content heavy, but our aim for the evening is not to make it a heavy session, but yet we do want to give you adequate and, I suppose, relevant advice in relation to HSA inspections. So before I answer Rory's question, what exactly is an inspection, it's worth mentioning that we have had discussions with the sector lead for education in the HSA. We've also met and discussed with Shay, school inspections and workplace inspections in general. In our discussions with the HSA, they have emphasised the objective to make schools safe and healthy places in which to work. Now, underpinning that objective is the 2005 Health, Safety and Welfare legislation, and indeed the Act itself. The regulations and the guidelines are essentially our roadmap, the roadmap for employers. And it's to lead us on the journey as we as employers, boards of management, and employees, the staffs of our schools, we embark upon this journey to achieve the same objective as the HSA, to make all of our schools safe, healthy places in which to work. Now, just remember, on this journey, there's no final destination. We're constantly in a state of constant motion here. So there isn't a final destination that we get to, and we'll refer to that maybe a little bit later. So what exactly is a HSA inspection? Well, it is exactly what it says on the tin. It is an inspection of a workplace. And schools and school personnel are very familiar with an inspection model. Members of our boards of management may or may not have experience of an inspection model, depending on their own circumstances, of course. The HSA inspector essentially needs to visit and verify the control measures in place that help us achieve that objective that I mentioned earlier. The control measures are documented in our risk assessment. The HSA inspector will use a sampling approach. So they may not examine every aspect of health, safety, and welfare in our school. Shay, would you like to comment there just on the sampling approach that inspectors will use?
Yes, Donald. I think the key thing to be looking at key areas within the school, and maybe things like fire safety, access and egress from the building, some of the equipment that's actually being used in the school, and they'd also be looking to see things like violence or aggression if that's an issue within the school. So what they're basically doing is looking to see what the key issues for you and your staff within the school.
Thanks, Shay. And again, as we said, they may or may not look at all of those areas or just some. To date, there have been small but limited number of school inspections, and they have focused, as Shay has said there, on the physical environment and then the people and relationships. So again, in relation to the discussions we have had with the HSA, they spoke about the physical environment and mentioned the areas that Shay has mentioned there, the importance of the area between the school gate and the school door. And here we're talking about perhaps car parks or indeed pedestrian ways into our schools. Directional arrows, signage, both in the car park and at pedestrian entrances and exits, help nudge people's behavior towards achieving the objective of creating safe and healthy places to work. And that's important to remember. A sign might encourage people to act in a safe, healthy way in schools. It also gives a clear message of our commitment as employers to a healthy and safe place of work. That's the first impression that all employees will receive and all visitors will receive when they enter our schools via car park or via pedestrian access. Some of the control measures for the physical environment might include signage, as we've mentioned, indicating perhaps to drivers to reverse into all car parking spaces. Signage to request all visitors to report to the school office. Perhaps within the school itself, signage in classrooms and corridors, indicating the maximum height at which we wish posters to be displayed at a safe height, so that employees are not climbing on desks or perhaps chairs, as we've all done in the past, but we're doing it in a safe way, perhaps a two-step ladder. Again, there may be a sign in the staff room reminding us that hot mugs of coffee should not be carried around school corridors. Now, I know that this final measure is rarely welcomed in any workplace, as coffee is a stable dietary requirement for all of us, myself included. However, as boards of management, and employers, we must ask ourselves, is this a hazard? And what measures can we take to eliminate or reduce the associated risk of that said hazard? Some hazards can be eliminated. Perhaps driving into car spaces can be eliminated very easily, while others, we can only reduce them. I would suggest the mugs of coffee would be more difficult to achieve, or it might fall into both categories, those that we can reduce and eliminate. But if you look, as Rory has mentioned already, at previous webinars, we have a webinar on conducting risk assessments. And in that, you will find plenty of ideas to address the hot mugs of coffee, as well as other risks around our schools and the measures that are considered. But remember, they must be relevant to your school. Rory, would you like to just mention here our discussions? Because we did speak to the inspector in relation to many of the risk hazards in schools.
Yeah, I think that when we met with the HSA, Don, it's important to know that it was a learning exercise from both ends. You know, that they also learned from us, for example, the role of a teaching principal. So when the inspector comes to a school, it is unannounced, and they may be coming to a school where there is a teacher teaching in their class who is the principal teacher. And so what happens in that instance? And trying to outline to them the importance of course, facilitating the inspection and helping and making sure that you're available, and sometimes the impossibility of getting cover for the person. And you know, those discussions are really important, that we give our perspective from the side of schools. But nevertheless, these health and safety inspections are extremely important, and really we should be cooperating. We must cooperate with them when the inspector shows up. But we did outline the difficulties around the teaching principalship. So ideas there that somebody may have to step in to the classroom to free up the principal to go. If the principal isn't there, it would be the most senior person, I think, Donald, what Deirdre outlined. They're very important events, Shay, aren't they? I mean, this isn't something really, this full cooperation is required, really.
Absolutely. But I think from my experience of working with schools are very good to cooperate with the inspectors. And I think we have to realize as well is that their focus is a preventative one. They're not there to find fault. So what they're looking basically to see, has the school got proper documentation, namely the safety statement? And again, that's the key document for any school. And as I said, I visit many schools, and the two things I'd always say to a school principal or staff is does the document refer to the 2005 Act, not the 1989 Act? And is it school specific? And I think as principals and as teachers, we're very good at copying and pasting. And very often we copy and change, but all we change is the name. And I think that's what the inspector would be looking at. I remember visiting a school in the Midlands, and one of the things it said is that the school was situated 10 minutes from the sea. Now, no matter how you got there, it was far further than that. So again, if an inspector was to see that, he wouldn't be too, or she wouldn't be too happy. But I think schools just need to make sure that their safety statement is relevant and that it contains the main risks that are associated with the school. If the inspector sees that, they will be very happy to see that that's what's in place.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, Donald, as well, isn't it? That the health and safety statement is a real and applicable to the school, that it's not a generic document, that people know about it, that it's real, not generic, and that people know about it. And I know we're going to come back to that feature later on.
We will certainly, Rory. Yeah, we will. In relation to people and relationships, or the employee-employee relationships and responsibilities, some of the control measures here might center around the promotion of positive staff relations, or perhaps adult bullying, or indeed, as Shay mentioned earlier, aggressive physical behavior by a pupil. Some of the control measures here might include a commitment on the school's part to promoting positive, supportive environment for staff through policies and procedures. Should a dispute arise, a clear roadmap is laid out for staff to follow in working together, procedures and policies for positive staff relations. And that's a measure that can be mentioned in our risk assessment. That document, agreed between management bodies and the INTO, stressed the importance of the informal stages of resolution. But it is a relevant measure, control measure, in dealing with any such item in school. Another procedure might be encouraging staff to avail of the employee assistance scheme. In relation to physical behaviour by a pupil, well, conducting a risk assessment on the particular behaviour of a child and answering questions such as, what should the staff member do if they observe a pattern leading to aggressive behaviour? How should the staff member respond during an outburst? Should they approach the child? Or how should they speak with the child while the incident is ongoing? Perhaps who should assist the staff member? And critically, how can they access this help? Now, much of this information is already present in a pupil's student support plan within school. And reference to this in any risk assessment for that particular classroom would be important. This can help to reduce and hopefully eliminate such behaviour and add to our school's safety statement and risk assessment. Shay, would you like to come in and add anything else there in relation to that?
No, Donald, I think you've covered it very well. I think what most schools do is they have individual education plans or behavioural plans in place. And I think the key in that is that they outline how the school is going to manage difficult situations. And if there was to be a court case or anything else against the board of management, what they're looking for is did the school do what a reasonable person would do? And again, I think if it's noted in the safety statement that there are individual education plans and behavioural plans in place, that will be the cover that the board needs in terms of managing issues like that. I think it's very important that it is recorded though.
Thanks, Shay. And I might just add that a risk assessment can be a short document, but I know Rory is going to speak about that later on.
Yeah, and John, I'm going to pop in there with just a few questions from the questions and answer box, because the questions are flowing in, and it's great to see them. And I might just run a couple of them past you there. First of all, a question there, Shay, who's ultimately responsible, the principal or the board of management, for health and safety in the school?
The board of management is ultimately responsible, Rory, and again, they can delegate functions, but at the end of the day, the ultimate responsibility lies with the board of management. Yeah, and a point echoed in the questions and answer, Donald, is the point we've raised with the HSA. What about the two-teacher school where there is no one to come and cover the class? You know, is there any possibility of notice? And we'll certainly bring that message back to the HSA, because that's coming back loud and clear from people we go. Just on that, Rory, I mean, the HSA has allowed for the construction industry that any environment that has only 3 employees or less can operate a code of practice. They don't have to have a full safety statement. And again, I think that's something that needs to be looked at for smaller schools as well, is that a code of practice or something similar to what operates like that would be very beneficial for schools. And I think it's something that might help 2 teachers or 1 teacher schools in terms of trying to meet their obligations.
Excellent, excellent. A set number of first aiders required in a school, Shay? Where do we stand on that? Again, it depends on the size of the school again. And again, that's something that every school is slightly different, but there is a kind of recommendation that maybe 1 in 50 there should be a trained person for that number. And again, the other key thing you have to make sure of is that there's somebody present in the school. It could happen that a person could be absent, that there's an alternative person available to do first aid. So I think that's the key recommendation, that from Monday to Friday, there's at least a person available at all times to cover first aid. Okay, so a ratio of about 1 to 50 there, Shay, is that yes. Yeah, excellent. Yes, copies of the slides are going to be available during the week. Donald, I'm going to let you back to your show straight away. So I'll let you roll on there, Donald. We'll come back in with more. Keep those questions coming in, folks.
That's great to see the questions coming in. And as Rory said, yeah, all the slides and recording of this webinar, as well as the resources that we will be using, will be available during the week on CPSMA website. So moving forward, I think I might have jumped 2 there, but moving on to the next question: when does an inspection, what happens when the inspector calls Gamla Skil? So the inspection model is very similar to Department of Education inspections. Some inspections will be known, and this was the question that came up in the Q&A there. Some inspections will be known to us. For example, maybe an inspection in relation to a fatal or a serious incident, non-fatal serious incident in the school. But others will be incidental inspections without notice. And we did discuss these, as Rory said, with the HSA, and they do understand the predicament that particularly small schools encounter. And, you know, we would be hoping here that other staff in the school would assist the principal or the main person in charge on the day if the principal is not present in the school. Again, I'm going to move to the HSA inspection itself now. And what is going to happen? What will the inspector want to know? Well, the inspector arrives and introduces himself or herself to you, or the most senior person, as we have said, and they will most likely ask you a number of questions about the main issues in your school. They want it to be school specific. They don't want generic policies, safety statements, and they certainly don't want generic answers from people that they're dealing with on the ground. They want to see it relates to your context and your school. They may ask you what experience or knowledge you have of health, safety, and welfare. And this is really to establish the competency of the person responsible for the day-to-day health and safety of people in the workplace. And before you get into a panic, there's no need to sign up to a local course or an online course in relation to this. Your attendance at a webinar similar to this and previous webinars by CPSMA, having completed a HSA e-learning course that we will mention again later on, and having a working knowledge of the HSA guidelines will satisfy the inspector in relation to the competency of the principal or the safety officer, or indeed the person in charge on the day. Remember, the inspector may wish to speak with staff members, so ensure your safety statement and risk assessment are known to the staff and that they're visible in the school through the actions and the interactions of all of our staff. And that's really key, I think, to cover both the physical environment and also the people and relationships. So people's actions and interactions need to be in line with what we have in our safety statement and particularly what we have in our risk assessments. Don't know whether either of you lads want to jump in there and add anything further to that.
Yeah, I'll just come in there, Donald, just with the Q&As and some of the questions that are coming in there. You know, is there a course that's mandatory to do? I think you've answered it there, Donald, in that I would guide people, first of all, towards the CPSMA website, towards the HSA website, which we're going to talk about towards the end of this webinar, and also towards Allianz. They have wonderful resources there on school, very straightforward, very concise, very to the point. And that's the type of thing we want. So to make sure that people don't get overly concerned about an over specialization and that they need a consultant in this area, that's not the case. The documents and the templates are there, and I think that they're fairly user-friendly as long as we get them in place and that they're concise to the point and people know about them. Lots of questions there, Shay, just in questions in relation to manual handling. Is it required? Is it compulsory every 2 years, or what's the situation with that?
Maybe, Rory, if I come back on the first one there, just in terms of training and that, my view on that is if the Board of Management and the staff have health and safety on as an agenda item at meetings, that would be a huge knowledge that people have, and it means it's been discussed and that people are up to date as to what's happening. So I think that to me is the main safeguard that people should be looking at, that it's not a topic that's hidden away, it's part of an agenda item. Manual handling is required if it's identified as part of the risk assessment. And again, one of the dangers that happens in a lot of schools is that people employ caretakers who will say they were working on building sites or whatever else, and they then injure their backs. And one of the key things that will come out is that they then find out they haven't received adequate training in terms of manual handling. So again, when you're working with caretakers, cleaners or whatever else, it would be essential that people actually that's part of a risk assessment. The same with SNAs, for example, if they're working with students who have movement difficulties or whatever else, all of that would need to be risk assessed. And if it's identified as a risk, well, then training has to be offered. And if somebody refuses to go for training, that should be recorded and noted, and they should be asked to sign that.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes we get caught up in words here, Donald, as well, and Shay, you know, that risk assessment. Risk assessment is just about identifying a problem. And then the controls is about what's the solution. What are you going to do about it? What's the problem? What are you going to do about it? And I think then you look at who's going to be responsible for it and what policy does it go to, you know? And we talk again about that just in terms of the resources that are available. Yeah, so keep coming with questions there, folks, and I'll pass you back to Donald.
Thanks, folks. I'm going to just add another little bit there about the HSA e-learning program. And I think it would be very beneficial for a board of management as a group of 8 people to sit and undertake this course. It's a 30-minute course, and it's managing health, safety and welfare in primary schools. As I say, it takes 30 minutes to complete. It's a very enjoyable course, very interactive and very informative for a board of management, and is a great place to start to see what have we already in place. Talking about manual handling, it's a question that we often get here, Rory, in the office in relation to whether teachers should avail of manual handling. Do you want to answer that, or?
Well, I think it depends, as Shay said there, on the risk assessment. You know, when you have a look at it, is there a need? Are there people lifting? And if there are, then finding a course that's suitable for them to do. I think Shay would be the response there, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I think that the risk should be, again, it's the elimination of the risk if it's all possible. And as I said, very often I've gone into schools and I've seen people carrying loads that they shouldn't be carrying. I'm talking about teachers carrying books and copies and a whole lot of stuff around the building. Again, there's ways of eliminating all of that. But generally, manual handling is required by caretakers, cleaners, and SNAs if they're working with students who have movement difficulties or whatever else. And again, that training is readily available to schools if it's needed.
Thanks, Shay. So just going back now to the inspection and the inspector himself or herself, they've come in, they've introduced themselves, they've spoken to you as the principal or perhaps the main person in charge, the safety officer in the school. And next, they will probably ask you to take them to a particular area within the school. Now, there are various locations around the school, such as car parks, entrance areas, boiler room, staff room, special class if one exists in the school. But remember, it is a sample of areas that they will inspect. Remember also that while they are walking around, the inspector will of course observe many areas that come under the health, safety and welfare umbrella. So ensuring safe storage of cleaning agents or chemicals, that they're properly stored within the school, the provision of appropriate fire extinguishers, the safe storage of equipment perhaps, as well as ensuring clear walkways to emergency exits. These are all areas that while the inspector may not look for them, he or she will observe them as they're walking around your school. Mention of a walkthrough reminds me of a suggestion I was going to make this evening, and that is that perhaps a member of your board of management or a safety officer might be tasked with carrying out a walkthrough inspection of your school at regular intervals to identify any health and safety hazards that perhaps have not been brought to your attention as of yet. I might also suggest that this inspection by a member of the board of management would be more productive and more relevant if it were to take place during the school day. Here, schools are at their busiest, but this is really what will happen if an inspector comes in. The inspector will most likely look for the safety statement, as Shay has said, and the current risk assessments. Now, the measures or the steps that we're going to take must be visible on the inspection. And that's the key to all of this. What we have in our risk assessment, the measures we are implementing in school must be visible. So if you have a risk assessment and a control measure included in that that says we will not hang posters beyond a certain height, well then the inspector will expect evidence of that in their walk around. Or indeed, if your member of the board of management is doing the walk around, they too should see evidence, visible evidence of what is contained within the risk assessment. The final part of the HSA inspection will be a meeting where the inspector will share with you areas for improvement and provide feedback. The feedback will be given verbally or sometimes in writing. And school boards will have 1 month to address any shortcomings or issues. Remember, however, the HSA have told us they are there to help, and they share the same objective as you and your board: to make our school safe and healthy places in which to work. So, Rory, we might jump back over to you and see, have you any results from the poll?
Yeah, I'm going to pass over to Dan-Marie there, who's going to give us the results of the introductory poll in a minute. Just a few other questions there in relation to the Q&As that are coming up. There's no difference between a safety rep and a safety officer, Shay, in terms of the naming of titles, is there?
Well, no, there is in terms of the safety rep is mandated in the 2005 Act. And again, all staff are entitled to nominate a safety representative who actually represents staff in terms of any issues that arise. A safety officer could be a post of responsibility, or a post that somebody who maybe has experience or knowledge about it, the board would appoint, but it's a distinct position as opposed to the safety rep.
Okay, very good. And the difference between a health and safety policy and a health and safety statement, Shay?
The policy is the first 2 pages of your safety statement, and that's the piece that's signed by the most senior person within the school, normally the chairperson of the board of management. And again, the safety statement is the full document with all your procedures in it and the risk assessments. Again, that's something that the HSA inspector will be looking at to see. They normally ask, who is the chairperson of the board of management? And when they look at the safety statement, they look to see who's actually signed it. Okay. So again, very often what happens is that when a principal or a deputy or board changes, the document itself hasn't changed. They may have changed some of the dates on it, but they haven't actually changed the personnel. So again, if a review is happening each year, let's just check that it is the current chairperson who has signed it, and also that the names of different staff who are involved in different roles are still the same people. For example, the first aiders we talked about earlier, if somebody's qualified in defibrillator training, whatever else, that those people are still members of the school staff, and that it's a current document.
Yeah, a query online there just in relation to that ratio, Shay. 1 to 50, does that count for all the people in the schools, like include students? And a query there that the ratio doesn't apply at all, really, because we're not a building site.
No, the ratio, I'm just giving out a ratio that I feel is safe. I think the normal ratio would be 1 to 100 in terms of the recommendations that's there. But the fact is that if you were to look at a school situation and see the number of staff that are there, it would be advisable if you can get as many people as possible trained in terms of first aid. And I think that's the challenge, is to actually get people who are willing to volunteer because of the risk that people feel in taking on responsibility. But I think a safe ratio for large schools, particularly with people moving around with games and everything else, that's what you have to be looking at. It's based on the risk assessment.
Yeah, okay, based on the risk assessment. And just go back to the poll results there. Don't answer the question you asked me. Yeah, so the poll results are in, and our HSA inspections new for primary schools, 40% of people said yes, 60% said no. And are they new, Shay?
Well, again, they're probably new in the sense that people haven't been aware of them, but I mean, they have been happening over a period of time. Prior to the crash with the buildings and everything else, they never visited schools, but since then they seem to have had time to do that work. And again, I think it depends on them. If people have been complained, as Donald said earlier, what very often happens is that a complaint is made by a staff member about unsafe practices. So that yes, they would have visited schools for that reason. It could be a neighbour of the school who's actually made a complaint in terms of some issue they have. So yes, they have visited schools, but it seems to be becoming a little bit more common now in terms of what they're doing.
Okay, very good. Listen, I'm going to go on. I'm going to have a quick 60-second quiz here, true or false round. I'm going to put my two colleagues here on the spot. We're going to rattle through some questions. Donald, let's give you the first 5. Shay, you've done the first one. True or false? HSA inspections are a new initiative, Shay. True or false?
False.
False. Each school is required to have a safety statement. True or false?
True.
Template policies and risk assessments are available on hsa.ie.
True.
Ooh. Yeah. The safety rep is always the principal teacher, Shay. True or false?
Absolutely false.
Okay, it doesn't have to be the principal teacher, Shay.
No, it certainly does not. It can be any member of staff.
Yeah, okay, very good. Let's see. Donald, let's switch over to you. There is a standard safety statement for all primary schools. True or false?
That's false, Rory, certainly. It must be specific to our own school.
Okay. A safety review cannot be part of our school self-evaluation, Donald. True or false?
No, it can form part of our school self-evaluation. Yes, indeed, it can.
Yeah, making this is a bit like a question on the Late Late Show, this next one. Health and safety is everyone's responsibility, Donald. True or false?
We're all in this together, Rory. Yes, it's everyone's responsibility.
All right, Shay, over to you. A HSA inspector may speak to all staff members or some staff members.
True.
True, yeah. Each school must hire a health and safety consultant, Shay.
False. Again, the only time you employ a consultant is if you have a specific issue that needs care. Some schools have people available, but the answer is false.
Okay. And finally, Donald, for you, health and safety policies include how we work together to resolve complaints and grievances.
Yes, absolutely, Rory. It's the physical environment, and then it's the people and the relationships also.
Very good, very good. Okay, Donald, I want to take over a little bit and just look at some of the resources that are available there to help people, if I may. So Donald has talked us through the inspection there, and I'm just going to rattle through some of the places where we can go to get some help and advice and find some of the documents that was there. And certainly starting off on this journey, even though I was a principal for 25 years, I must say that I found myself very nervous kicking off there because I wasn't sure where to go or where to look or what to do. I almost tied myself up in knots, but really I came down to 3 important places that I wanted to visit. And the first one I have on the screen here is hsa.ie. And the documents that you're looking at there, and remember these slides will be available afterwards, are very, very helpful indeed. So to access these documents, what you do is you go into hsa.ie, Donald, go into your industry, select education, and from there you arrive into this screen that you're looking at here, or one very like it indeed. So again, that's hsa.ie, your industry, education. And as you look at the screen there on your left-hand side, you'll see guidelines on managing safety, health and welfare in primary schools. It's a very helpful document indeed, because in there is a checklist and a guide for developing a safety statement. So that's the place to go first. If I was looking at, do I have a safety statement? Is it up to date? What does it look like? I would go to the hsa.ie, go into your industry, go into education, and find that safety statement there. Remember, it has to be real. It cannot be generic. Think of Shay's story about the school in the Midlands overlooking the sea. Make sure it's applicable. Make sure people know about it. Make sure it's not gathering dust on the shelf, as we say, with every policy that's there. You know, I was trying to think there, Shay, a piece of advice to give people about how often it should be reviewed. And it came up in the question Q&A there. How often should the health and safety document be reviewed? I think you've given away already there because you're going to put it on the agenda of every board meeting, I think. Is that right?
No, well, I think health and safety could be discussed at every board meeting in terms of just saying we'd no accidents or there's been no issues, or we'd fire training or whatever else, or fire drills. But the safety statement should be reviewed annually, or if there's major changes within the workplace. In other words, if you put on a new building or if you change procedures in terms of the way pupils move around the yard or whatever else, then it should be looked at. It may also have to be changed following the health and safety inspector's visit, because he or she may find something in it they're not happy with, and they may recommend that changes are made there as well. But generally, it should be reviewed at the end of every year. And again, that may sound like a daunting task, but it actually isn't, because if you actually think about it, most of the risk assessments in the document are going to be the same as they were the previous year. And what I would always recommend to schools is that at the end of the year, staff would be given a document, a one-page document to say, are there any health and safety risks within their classroom before they leave? And over the course of the summer, they can be addressed by a caretaker or by somebody else over the summer, so that when people come back, that's been done. And that's a record as well, that you've been actually being proactive in terms of managing it. I think the key thing is each year is just to see that the personnel who are given responsibilities are still the same personnel the following year. Because again, if you put down a control measure and it's Shay Bannon to do that, and Shay Bannon is no longer there, well, then who's actually responsible for it? I'm thinking in particular of first aid, replenishing of a first aid box. If somebody isn't doing that, where does responsibility go? So look, it's a very simple process, but it demands a little bit of time by a board of management, just saying at the end of the year, we're reviewing the document.
Okay, thanks for that, Shay. Yeah, and I think then on the right-hand side, you're looking at the risk assessment. And as I said earlier there, the templates for the risk assessment, when you go onto the HSA website, there are over 52 or 53 of them, over 50 of them anyway there. And it can be seen very daunting, but they're actually quite brief and to the point. They basically identify what the risk is, look at what the control would be in place for that particular risk, look at who's going to be responsible for it and how it relates to policy in the school. So it isn't a very, brevity is important, you know, so that it's clear to everybody what's involved, that it doesn't become just this worthless, almost paper exercise, that it's a very living document, that it's very much alive there and it's in place. While I am on helpful websites, the Allianz website is always also very helpful. And to get into the Allianz website there, go into allianz.ie, click onto products, and from products then into the school section. And you'll find templates later in Mairlogs as well there done as well around different issues, because I know in the Q&A some people had questions about assembly and dismissal of pupils there before and after school, and I would guide people towards the Alliance documents on that. Alliance are also helpful in going around and helping with inspections as well, and maybe having a walk around. So contacting your local Alliance rep, seeing if they're around, going for a walk around is another suggestion that could be helpful there. I'm flying along here. I'm very conscious of time. Donal, anything I'm forgetting there, or are we okay?
No, I think we're good, Rory. I think we're good to continue.
Okay, so that's the HSA.ie, the one you're looking at there, and Alliance would be the other one that I would point you to for the safety statement. Also, just there on the HSA one, there are 4 different sections when you go in, and Donal has mentioned it already about an online course, a health and safety course. And I would recommend that if one of the actions that comes from tonight's meeting is Shay's idea about it being on the agenda for the Board of Management meeting, having a look here, I would highly recommend the HSA online course there that is available on that website. It is about 20 slides, about 30 minutes long, and it really is beneficial for everyone really, but if we want to start with the board, I think that really would be a strong recommendation from us here. Lads, what do you think of that?
I agree 100%. I think it would give a very good knowledge, and I think would also reassure people that they're actually doing a very good job and that there's not a whole lot of work involved in this. Once they have the basic documentation together, it's about renewing it and keeping it up to date.
Yeah, I think that's a very strong point. We have a lot of this done already here, and I think that course really underlines that. Dawn, you might move that slide on for me, move on to the next one, because we're going to just very quickly. Shay has touched on this loads of times. We've all come around it, make sure it's up to date, make sure the right people have it signed, all of that is there. Review it annually, I think is the point that Shay has made, and it's a lived document. It's not something that's sitting up on the shelf gathering dust. Somebody asked in the Q&A, does it have to be online? Does it have to be available, in hard copy? I think as long as it's a living document really is the important thing. Shay, would that be correct there? Absolutely.
I think it's a safety statement is a photograph taken at a particular time, and it's something that changes. So again, that's why you review it. For me, the key people, it's very important as well that every staff member would sign the document to say they've had sight of it, because if an issue was to arise, there's always, did they or did they not see it? So I think once the safety statement has been agreed on new staff members coming in, it would be very important that they have sight of the document, particularly in terms of classrooms or areas where they're going to be working in, and that they sign it to say they've had sight of it. I think that's good practice.
Yeah, very good, very good. And that HSA course is on the HSA on www.hsa.ie. So from that, you go into your industry, into education, and then you will find 4 sections in there. And it is the 4th section, which is called Health and Safety Courses, and you'll find it there. That was just a question there in the Q&A. Potential training websites and accessing those. Any sort of guidance on that, Shay?
Well, again, there's different IOSH, the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. They have a website where you can get information. There's obviously the equivalent of the HSA in England where you can access documents as well. I think Alliance as well, I think that's a key resource that primary schools should be using. Their representatives are available to come out to the school, and they also produce their journal a number of journals each year, which highlight case law that actually has happened. And again, it shows schools that if they follow proper procedures and have good best practice, that they have nothing to worry about. And again, an awful lot of cases are won on the basis of good, strong safety statements and people sticking rigidly to what they said they would do. You don't have to do everything right, but you have to do what you say to do on the tin. I think that's very important.
What you said in the tin, yeah. We move on to the next slide because we're coming towards the end. I want to rattle down there. What to do next? I think we have a number of actions that have been there. Maybe a walk around, as Donal has suggested before. We have any idea of any other inspection, a walk around with a colleague, a walk around with somebody from the board, a walk around with Alliance, putting it on the agenda for any type of meeting that it becomes part of everybody's responsibility, looking at the health and safety statements that you have already, looking at the resources that are available on CPSMA.ie and our webcasts, and the wonderful work that all our other trainers have done, Noreen, and everybody before us has done, that you're not inventing the wheel here. There is help available. Make sure you're accessing CPSMA.ie, HSA.ie, Alliance.ie. These are wonderful places to get those resources, and just keeping it alive and keeping it to the fore, I think is the main point we wanted to make there. Okay, we move on to the next one. Donal, anything else coming up in the Q&A, Donal, before we go on?
Well, we have a couple of questions here, so I'm going to throw them in as a 60-second quiz just to lighten the mood a little bit. So I might throw out a couple of questions to both of you guys. Rory, we'll start with you. Is a safety committee mandatory? One of the questions that came in on the Q&A.
No, not a committee isn't mandatory, I'd say, but in the size of a school, sometimes a very large school, it could be something that could be very helpful.
And a 6 marker here for Shay. Shay, school asking, do I need a safety statement from each contractor coming into the school?
Under legislation, a contractor is supposed to provide a safety statement. The way I would see it operating is that they must have a safety statement outlining the key areas that they're working on. I think it's very important that a conversation is had with the contractor, and that it must be established, obviously, that they're competent and qualified to do the jobs they're doing. And that's where the safety statement gives you that practice.
Okay, and Rory, another interesting question here from a school. Should the safety statement cover off-site school activities, something like a school tour now is the example that they've given here?
Yeah, and it should identify the risks on the school tour or something like that. So yes, it should, yeah. Okay,
but again, a short, brief document.
Yeah, and people should know what's in it and that it's to the point, yeah.
Okay, and Shay, I might throw this one to you. It's in relation to substitute staff coming into our school. What training or induction, perhaps, should a school provide for new teachers or special needs assistants, including substitutes, as I said?
But I think they should be given information, all information regarding safety, health and welfare, that should be provided to them. And again, any of the areas they're going to be working, specific safety in any classrooms they're going to be working, they should have sight of all of that. And again, when they've seen it, they should sign the document to say they've been given access to it.
Very good. Shay, I'm going to stay with you for a minute. What happens if a HSA inspector finds something wrong in our school?
I think we've covered some of this earlier in what we covered earlier on, but what happens is he will give a verbal warning. Most cases, a verbal warning. If not, they can actually issue a warning that the Board of Management, that there'll be a follow-up action and it'll be written. And again, the Board of Management is given a period of time to address that.
Okay, and now this question was answered, it came in earlier, but we've answered it, I think. How often should a school write or revise its safety statement? And I think that was asked in advance. There was a number of those questions that came in early on in the time. But again, as we've said, as often as is necessary, and if any changes occur to the environment, certainly I would be looking at it again. What types of accidents, Rory, must be reported to the HSA, the Health and Safety Authority?
Well, first of all, an accident involves an employee being absent for 3 days or more on the IR1 form on the hsa.ie. I hate using words. IR is Incident Report 1. It's a very brief document, and you put stuff if somebody has missed 3 days of work because of an accident or something at work or assault at work. Obviously, any fatal accident or anything of a very serious nature like that.
So it's obvious that acronyms aren't just used in the education sector. They're used broadly, I suppose, in every sector. Look, I think that there was loads of questions that came in. We've tried to group as many of them as possible together. But if people have further questions, by all means, use the Q&A here now, and we'll try to address those perhaps in a future newsletter. We're coming close to the end, Rory and Shay, and to everyone else that has joined us. And just want to mention again, maybe where are the resources and how can we access them? So we've mentioned a couple here, and we just put up a visual here for people. The first one here on the top right-hand side is taken from the CPSMA website, previous webinars, as we have mentioned, and podcasts, as well as useful links. They will be updated very soon to include tonight's webinars. And as Rory said, this is a series of 3, this being the 3rd webinar that CPSMA have provided on health and safety. Then we have the HSA website here. HSA e-learning is what I put the image on. Again, that contains the course that Rory has mentioned and that we would recommend to all boards of management and indeed some school staff as well. Additional resources, there'll be a list of additional resources. All the resources that we have mentioned tonight or that we have consulted in preparation for tonight will be listed on our website. And finally, then we have risk assessments that are available through the HSA and again through Allianz website. There's a plethora of sample templates available and very interactive sessions on the Allianz site as well, which are very useful. So I think that is bringing us very close to the end. And again, I just want to thank our co-presenters. So gur maith agus Rory agus Shay, míle buchas as ocht bhór ina chur tránóna inniuh, agus libse a chuirde a hátrééis chlárú agus freistal an webinar tránóna inniuh. Tá súlagainn gur bhain sibh tanmh agus tarbh as an rud. And remember, we're all in this together. We're all share the same objective to make schools safe and happy, healthy places in which to work. As always, the CPSMA advisors are available through email at info@cpsma.ie or by telephone ringing the office on 01 629 2462. So gur maith agaibh a chuirde agus fannaigh slán.